Going to go to Lebanon now, where an Israeli attack has killed 2 people in the southern city of Navatia. An earlier strike targeted Hezbollah fighters in the area. The military says they were located near its so-called security zone. It comes as Israel and Lebanon hold a 5th round of US brokered talks in Washington, D.C. Israel's defense minister says the army will not pull out of southern Lebanon, even if the US demands its withdrawal. Earlier, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has called for an end to Israel's occupation in the south. Well, the so-called pilot zones that Heidi's just been describing first featured in US brokered talks in early June. Now, according to officials, Israeli troops would hand over control of some territory in southern Lebanon to the Lebanese forces, as Heidi was just outlining. Now, Lebanon's army would undergo US and UN training and vetting to ensure they are not linked to Hezbollah, and Israel would maintain a military presence inside the buffer zone. Daniel Levy is president of the US Middle East Project. He's a former Israeli political negotiator, and he's joining us from London. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Heidi was just describing that this plan appears to be on a parallel track, if you like, to what is going on with regard to the Memorandum of Understanding. Is there a risk, do you think, that we're going to get confusion and grey areas and the whole thing may slow down or even stall?
Well, we've already seen 2 more Lebanese killed today. So Israel breaking that already in Lebanon. There were 145 prior to that killed since the MOU, but had been relatively quiet for a couple of days. Not to mention Israeli killings in West Bank and Gaza alongside Lebanon in the last 24 hours. Let's be clear, as long as there are Israeli forces in southern Lebanon, they're not going to sit still. First of all, they are a target for resistance. That's legitimate when there's an occupying army. But secondly, they will carry out operations and they will try and convince the Americans that these were necessary. What you might have, as you suggested, Rob, is an attempt to play these 2 tracks off against each other. The Iran-US negotiations on the MOU and the US-sponsored direct talks between Israel and the Lebanon government. And the idea being floated of these pilot areas, the problem is that the way Israel will likely treat this is that it is so tight-fisted and mean in what it offers in that pilot program while still conducting other operations, that this will end up being designed to kind of humiliate the Lebanese government and make it look bad, because Israel is asking the government in Beirut to kind of walk a high wire act in terms of navigating Israel being in the country, everything Israel has done to destroy, killing aid workers, double taps, all those things we've heard about. And yet it is saying, talk to us. The government of Lebanon on that high wire might hope that Israel will offer it a safety net. Instead, Israel is likely to be shaking that wire to make it topple. That's how it has treated the PA in the past. That unfortunately looks like being the modus operandi.
You mentioned there that there was a possibility that they might use one to kind of trade off against the other. Joseph Aoun appears to be treating Lebanon, or is anxious, I believe, to treat this deal as separate from the one that's being negotiated between the United States and Iran. Is there a risk, do you think, that that is going to bring him into direct conflict with the US if the US gets to the point where it thinks its deal with Iran is going to be compromised by some additional deal that's being done by Lebanon?
Well, I think the question here more is whether Netanyahu will place himself in a position where Trump thinks Israel's actions are going to undermine the broader deal. So the Israeli leadership will test their freedom of maneuver. The Israeli prime minister and his defense minister have continued to tell us that, contrary to the very first article of the MOU, which says it will respect Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity, that Israel will maintain the security zone. Netanyahu has just said, as long as he is prime minister, they will maintain that security zone. He has told us that he will be the first to solve the problem of drones. I mean, I almost want to laugh. It's as if fiber optic cable drones are the final word in asymmetric warfare. Creativity ends with these drones, and if you can just solve this military problem, everything else will be plain sailing. Absolute nonsense. So Netanyahu will test the president. Netanyahu will hope that despite everything we've heard in the last days and week, all the frustration, all the expletives, that you will have a US that comes round and says, look, we can't go too hard against the Israelis. Maybe we owe Netanyahu something. Maybe we have to give him this, whatever the this is. That's his experience in the past of how he manages American political affairs. And the US know. Look, when it comes to opening their blockade of Hormuz, when it comes to offering waivers for Iran to export oil, when it comes to where they position their troops, that's all in America's gift to give directly. When it comes to Israel in Lebanon, if you actually want to get the Israelis to do what's in the deal and what you've agreed to, you will have to sustain a standoff and pressure and use your leverage. You have the leverage, there's no question there. What you tend never to do is use it, and that may be put to the test in the coming days, weeks and months.
Really interesting to get your thoughts on this. Daniel Levy, president of the US Middle East Project, former Israeli political negotiator. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rob.